Hi, my name is Hannah. I'm here with Katie Jackson, who is the Humanities Officer with the Student Union. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Could you first briefly just outline what the Humanities Officer does?
Yeah, absolutely. So any member of the exec team is a representative of students voted in by the student body around March time each year, and the role is very strange. I mean, every day is kind of different. A lot of it is kind of in meetings, but some of it is also kind of working directly with students, which is something I definitely feel like I'm doing a lot more this year than I did last year, which is so important, I think, because you need that fresh perspective of people that are living it right now. But I got voted in on a manifesto or an ideas statement, and basically my role is just to kind of get those things done within a year. So yeah.
You did say last year that you didn't want to sort of reapply and rerun.
Yeah.
What kind of changed in that period?
It was so strange because the reason I didn't want to rerun is because I'm still between my degree, so I haven't graduated yet. So I'm between my second and third year of a sociology degree. Mm-hmm. So my thing kind of the entire time was, well, I don't really want to take 2 years out. 1 year out's like long enough. But then I got round to, as I said, about February when the nominations closed, and I was like, I'm just not ready to finish it here. I feel like I've not done enough for myself and for students, and even though, you know, I'd moved along things, I really wanted to see them through. Mm-hmm. And I think that you can only really do that with longer than a year because things move very slowly in this university.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So what sort of ideas that you started in the first year have you sort of built on in your second term?
Absolutely. So the big things is kind of the stuff on assessment and feedback. So that's something that students have like consistently told us is a problem. So for example, not getting feedback on time, or the feedback being of really bad quality. And these are things that I think there's some people across the university, some academic staff who are doing it really, really well. But then there are some that just aren't, and that's how it's kind of coming up. And there's certain programs and courses that are not doing as well as others. So that's something that has continued on to this year. It's been really helpful having Duncan, the new VC, because he has really kind of pushed on these things. So it's things that me and the faculty officers have been saying for over a year, and the rest of the exec team. But actually now that there's a new leadership, there has been a change in priorities, and they're really pushing on that now. So another thing that's continued on this year has been the decolonising the curriculum work that I've been doing with Aisha, who's also a re-elected officer from last year. And we've really been working on making sure that the work continues. So we've hired a decolonising strategy assistant who's going to be kind of key in making sure that this work carries on. But we're really getting buy-in from the university to fund these roles, and we want to hire student reps who are going to be within the schools to basically carry out the decolonising the curriculum strategy. But this year is going to be about building that strategy, and then beyond that we'll then be implementing it. So yeah.
Your statement also spoke about demilitarising the curriculum.
Yes.
How would you define that within the context of the curriculum, and what are the sort of practical solutions to 100%. Demilitarising the curriculum?
Yeah, I think that one's been particularly tricky, and it is a very it's a topic that a lot of people are talking about at the moment. But I think the research that is done in certain places within the university, not so much in humanities, but across other parts of the university, links to arms companies and things like that. I think that that's been a real sticking point for the student body. We're seeing it a lot at the moment, a lot of demos kind of against that. So that is something that as an exec team, as a wider exec team, we're really working on communicating with the university about research ties and about investments, and they will be coming through in some of the open meetings that we're doing with the senior leadership team. So that's just been constantly kind of a lobbying thing that we've been doing kind of as a whole team, not just kind of within humanities, but yeah.
Also, there was a lot about getting rid of unnecessary assessments.
Yeah.
How would you define, particularly within humanities, an unnecessary assessment, and what do you think is the best way to assess, particularly within humanities?
100%. So I think that the one thing that I found, especially with my degree, and things have kind of changed now with AI coming in, and so things have changed quite a lot, but I found with my degree that it was just everything was the same. like we had, you know, it was just essays, and I thought, you know, I kind of want to do something different if it was maybe a podcast or like something that was a bit more exciting. So that's something where I've been constantly kind of advocating for diverse assessments which people can choose. So some people might be like, a podcast is the last thing I would ever want to do, but some people are like, that is 100% something I want to add to my CV, to say that I've done that. So it's been really about making that optionality in assessment so people can choose what they want to do rather than it being so kind of binary and you have to do an essay or you have to do an exam. And in terms of the having less unnecessary assessments, we really have been working with the faculty, so with the humanities faculty, on making sure that we're not assessing on the same things all the time. So learning objectives that your course might have, they normally have like one, like learning objective 1, 2, 3 and 4. We've found that some assessments are assessing on the same ILOs, so an essay might be assessing on ILO 2. Sorry, ILO stands for intended learning objectives, and then another one will be assessing on the exact same one. So we want to make sure that we're not repeating that, because once the students said, okay, I can do this, there's no point assessing it again, unless they need to resit, which obviously they'll resit the same exam. So it's basically just being taken away the fact that students have a lot on their plate, especially with the cost of living crisis and some students having to work part-time or even full-time for some students. So really making sure that they're not unnecessarily being assessed on certain things. So yeah.
You mentioned AI briefly. I know you presented at the Reimagining Student Experiences where you touched on the topic of AI, particularly within humanities, which is like the study of humans in various forms. What do you think the role of AI should be within university life in general?
So this like subject is really interesting to me because there was a few months ago, like not long ago at all, I kind of was in a meeting with various different people from across the university and kind of said like, I don't understand how AI relates to humanities. Like I had quite little interest in it just as a concept because I'm so kind of qualitative and about speaking and humanising things, and obviously AI is not human, so like but actually it's going to be so important, I think, for the future of education, because we're no longer going to be kind of focusing on, you know, these essays that are written in a certain way, but in humanities it's all about critical thinking. So it's about how do we use AI to save time, because I think that there's so much reading in humanities courses, and I am generalising there, obviously there's courses that might not have as much reading, but how do we make sure that we maybe have more time to be sat in an interactive tutorial rather than spending that independent learning time reading? Because I think that time is really important to students, and we've found through research that the time spent in tutorials interacting with people's peers is actually way more important than sitting there writing an essay. And so I think that's what AI is going to be really useful for, saving time that we would have been using doing things like reading through a 400-page book about whatever, and actually just being like, okay, I've got the key findings from that, I know why that's useful and why it isn't useful, now I'm going to put this into my research. So
it would be more of you view it as more of like it's more helpful for humanities students than like hindering.
For sure.
So you also met the MP for Manchester Rusholme, Aswell Khan. What student-based ideas did you discuss, and what were the sort of practical results from that discussion?
So that was a very last-minute meeting. I just want to say that I don't really do much local government things as an education officer, so it was really exciting for me because I've not had a chance really to do that yet. So it was kind of the same day because our city and community officer Elliot was on leave at the time, so I kind of stood in for him. So what it was we were talking about student housing, which is obviously such an important thing, especially because we know, I mean, I could list the amount of problems I've had as long as my arm, you know, that I've had since being at uni, with things like having mould in my house, but also with a landlord who didn't want to give me my deposit back, and you know, so I think it's really important to discuss that, and that's what the point of that was. So Afzal Khan now has the largest student constituency in England. Wow. So I think it's like 75,000 students, which is huge because obviously that's Manmet, Salford, not Manmet, Salford, sorry, Manmet and Manchester students live in that Rusholme area. So it basically was discussing how we can make sure that landlords are actually considering that students are just people, because I think they're not often viewed like that, and that might be a bold statement, but yeah, from my experience that's how it's kind of been. But also we were talking about no more guarantors, because for international students it's really tricky for them to get guarantors in the UK, because they have to be UK based, they have to have been in the UK for a certain amount of time, and for someone who has no family here, which for a lot of international students will be the case, that is almost impossible to get a guarantor. So that's largely what we're discussing.
Yeah. You also, in both last year and your mission statement for this year, talk about employment opportunities and like really advocating and prioritising like employment opportunities within humanities, because it is such a broad subject and you can like go into so many different areas with it. So what are some of the practical ways that you've been advocating for those, like pushing for student employment opportunities?
Yeah, 100%. So like with humanities, because as you've just said, like it's difficult, but also it's like you've got so many options that it's just almost impossible to choose, because you've got, you know, you're learning things that across such a wide range of like personal attributes, I suppose, like yeah. So with sociology, for example, I can't even begin to think what I'm going to do, you know, after I graduate. So it's really interesting, and I think, so I've been talking to the careers service a lot about this and about how we can make sure that humanities students are really being catered to, because I think it's really difficult in things like placements and the graduate opportunities that they offer are often catered towards people in STEM, and they're or people in subjects in humanities like law and things that are a lot more vocational, I suppose. But we've been talking about the creative industry and making sure that students have those opportunities. So we're working at the moment on an employability framework at the university. It's in the consultation stage at the moment, so it's very much like with students. So I'm working with the school reps at the moment who are within the education team to make sure that we're gathering feedback on what employability is important in each school, and then embedding that into the framework. And that's really going to be kind of leading the career service in the way that they're going to work over the next few years. Also though, I think it's really important, especially in the times that we're in, and really tough financial times, that we're making sure that things like being part of student media, or being part of society leadership, or being a student rep, or being a student leader, how are we making sure that that's still attractive to students? Because it does give, like, you know, the most amazing employability opportunities, but actually students would probably prefer at the moment, due to financial hardship, would probably prefer getting a part-time job. But we want to make sure that this volunteering is still really attractive, because it's so useful, and it's such a key part of making friends at university and all the things like that. So so at the moment at the SU we're working on a strategy for making sure that offer is as good as it can be with the limited monetary, you know, barriers that we have at the SU, but we really want to be offering as much as possible, whether that's digital badging that you can put on your LinkedIn, or, you know, anything like that. So we're exploring those opportunities as well.
Yeah, perfect. So you and the other faculty officers are also currently working on a rewritten version of the student charter. What would you say were like the problems with the original, and what can we sort of expect to see in the new one?
Absolutely. So I think the problems with the original, so I didn't even know it existed. I think that's like a key
Yeah.
problem. so I think that it's shown at some welcome events, but not all students go to welcome events for various reasons. You know, it's the first week, it's very busy, being at uni. So I think that it just wasn't massively useful, I think, and we read through it and we were like, okay, a lot of this at the moment with the current state that we're in isn't possible. You know, for example, there was stuff on timetabling and making sure that timetabling is like really useful for students, and we know that students really struggle with timetable clashes and course unit enrolment, and so that's something that the university just cannot promise, because the IT isn't at the point where it's ready for that yet. And that is something that they're actively working on. But that's something we wanted to make sure that we were like, there's no point having this charter there if it's not actually happening or it's not true. So we are actually actively rewriting that student charter now. So we're going to be sending that off and going through consultation with SLT, but also with, again, our school reps and our academic reps who are really active within the Students' Union. And we're hoping for it to be a video instead of it being like this written thing, because we know from consultation with students that videos are a lot more accessible with captions, and so we're going to try and do that. So that can be shown at welcome events, but also it can be on Blackboard or Canvas when that comes in, and it can be just something that's a lot more accessible for students to be like, okay, I know what to expect from my degree. This is what I should be expecting from teaching staff. This is what teaching staff expect from me. So yeah.
And just finally, the student satisfaction at Manchester is quite low for Russell Group unis, and it's also particularly inconsistent within like the humanities department. Why just overall do you think that is, and what sort of, if you were the Chancellor, like what would you do to fix that?
I think that it all kind of comes down to inconsistency, because I think that across humanities we have like a ridiculous amount of programs and like courses that you can take, which is great because it means that students can do the most unique courses and be like, this is what I want to do. So I think that it's really nice that we have that, but also it means that the way that those courses are set out can be really inconsistent, just because you've got to think of how many staff go into that, how many students are in that, how many different departments there are and things like that. So I think that it can't be as consistent as things like STEM subjects can be, because we don't have any professional bodies apart from in things like law. So I think we don't really have the same expectations that things like medicine have. But I think that ultimately it comes down to we have to expect more, because talking about student satisfaction is we're 23rd out of 24 Russell Group universities, but we have schools across the whole university that would actually be at the top of the Russell Group if so that's so much inconsistency. Like we need all of the schools to be performing at a really high level. I mean, this is a great university to be at for the social aspect, in my opinion. It's a great place to be, but until the teaching gets up to like the level that things like the research at this university is, which is really high, until the teaching gets up to that level, I think we're not going to see much movement in the student satisfaction. But the university are very aware of these issues, and we just need to keep pushing on that door to like make sure that it stays open, I suppose.
Well, perfect. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.